Meet Zeke Dragon, the grumpy-faced newborn who is actually our main character and shouldn't be underestimated just because he's still a baby. Before his current life, he was Gila's dragon and the leader of the mightiest family on the entire continent. The reason he's trapped in this tiny newborn body stretches back over 1,000 years. He had climbed to the very top of martial arts, only to realize that no single human life could ever be long enough to break through that final wall. He held on to an old story that said a golden metal fruit was hidden deep inside a holy place guarded by a divine dragon. They said that fruit held the secret to living forever. Holding that thought close to his heart, Gila's fought hard and bested the dragon god, then dragged his injured body to the tree to grab the miraculous fruit, declaring with a grin that it would let him reach the highest level of martial arts before taking a bite without even a second's pause. This was Gila's dragon, the man who was said to be the strongest in the whole world. Years turned into decades, and before anyone knew it, time had raced past. Inside a quiet room, sad cries echoed as people worried that he was too old to live, so they decided to let him rest in peace. Sitting beside the bed was William, the clan's eldest son, who kept shouting for his father. Seeing the pain on Zeke's face, he spoke up in his weak old body. "Stop making that pathetic face. My time has simply run out." Hearing this, William joked through his tears. "This mansion feels so cold without mother or you around." Zeke shook his head lightly and said, "Don't be so weak," but in his heart he thought, in the end, those legends couldn't be trusted, but I'm still lucky to have had a good wife and obedient children. He reached out to stroke his grandson's face and continued, "My beloved children, I Gilfas have lived long enough and have no regrets left." On the outside, he sounded fine, but inside Zeke was seething with anger, muttering that she made him laugh while admitting that yes, he still had regrets. If only I had more time. If only I had more time, for I still haven't reached the peak of martial arts as Gila's trembling old hands reach upward. His son couldn't stop crying as he watched Gila's dragon's life fade away, though it felt like only the beginning. Once Gilfas figured out how long it had been, he suddenly woke up. Confusion crashed into him instantly as he wondered if he'd fallen asleep, realizing these familiar wallpaper patterns belonged to the annex building, and his body felt strangely weightless. But what are these little hands doing? Gila stared in shock at his tiny newborn hands. "I was reborn as a baby, and even the strongest man in the world felt cold sweat break out when he realized what had happened. After a few seconds, he calmed down and tried to steady himself, though dragging someone as clueless as me, who had just hit level 10, into this bizarre situation without me realizing it was impossible. This is definitely not right. So who could have done this and how?" While he was thinking, a bright idea suddenly struck him. Could it really be that fruit? I figured the fruit gave me immortality, but instead it just sent me back to start over, and that totally threw me for a loop. This was actually amazing luck, because it meant he could finally see the true peak of martial arts. And even though he was grinning like an idiot, he looked around and noticed countless cribs filled with other sleeping babies, which helped him quickly realize he wasn't alone. I returned to the Dragon Clan in the annex, but I'm confused to see so many newborns gathered all in one spot. The moment that idea popped into his head, a bunch of maids walked in from outside, hauling a huge tub of red liquid and a stack of empty milk bottles. As they poured the red liquid into the bottles, Zeke studied it quickly and noticed a maid from the Eldragon clan standing there, looking like she was ready to feed the many newborns filling the room. Without knowing what was going on in their minds, a maid shouted, "Get ready," and another instantly agreed, then suddenly pulled a goblin out of thin air and forced a milk bottle full of red liquid into its mouth, leaving the main character completely confused as the goblin's chest suddenly glowed hot red like burning metal. Then its chest burst open, sending a spray of fresh blood all over Zeke. He stood frozen in shock, wondering what had just happened, as the maid calmly explained that diluting the liquid would make it safe, and the others quickly rushed to feed the newborns the red liquid, leaving Gila's with no way to escape their fate. Having just seen what happened to the goblin, Gila's was in a panic, wondering in shock, "What? Are they making us drink that? This isn't milk, but a liquid holding enough power to kill a newborn if fed to them," which is absolutely insane. Just as he thought about it, the moment the nipple touched his lips, Zeke's body reacted on its own, opening wide to suckle with desperate hunger. That made Gila's burn with anger deep inside, and he cursed himself for forgetting he was just a newborn. Next, as the red liquid drained away, Gila's finally understood it was ancient dragon blood and cursed these fools for making him drink it, realizing now exactly what they meant by diluting it. "This is terrible. I have to spit it out because I've already swallowed a little bit, and that small amount probably won't kill me. The other kids are instinctively spitting it out, too, and I need to do the same before I explode." Zeke asked himself if this was truly the right move, but then he saw it clearly. It was a jackpot right before him. If I take in all this power, I'll leap past my old limits and finally touch the very peak of martial arts. Though I don't know why this is happening, I'm grabbing hold of this chance. Don't underestimate me, because you're about to see just how powerful Gila's dragon really is. Zeke growled inside himself, clenching his teeth as the old dragon's blood sent waves of pain through him. His brows knitted together as he muttered, "Don't underestimate Gila's dragon," while the maid gasped in surprise at how hard he was squeezing the bottle, and Zeke, cheeks puffed out and sucking hard, vowed to swallow every drop of the ancient dragon's power so he could finally reach the martial arts peak he missed in his past life, imagining a golden-eyed giant dragon roaring at another shadowy beast. Zeke watched in shock as the old dragon bit down on its rival's neck, realizing with confusion that this power was being stolen so effortlessly. No, this is perfect. Outside, he lay in the soft crib, frowning as he looked around thoughtfully, while somehow I managed to pull it off. Zeke lay there feeling the energy from the cribs nearby and thinking that while the other kids survived, he couldn't let his guard down against a newborn's instinct to live. He sucked on his finger and drifted off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by a sudden, overwhelming wave of sleepiness. 7 long years flew by until, deep in the forest, a counting voice suddenly rang out. 998, 999. Zeke pressed one hand in the dirt, doing push-ups with a heavy rock strapped to his back. Then, using both legs, he sent the giant boulder flying high into the air. Next, Zeke quickly jumped out of the way, just as the big boulder crashed down from above. Zeke, the ex-leader of the Dragon clan, bowed his head to gaze at his own hands in awe, marveling at how his powerful body was all thanks to the ancient dragon blood. Thinking back to the world he knew, he realized that everyone, without exception, held some kind of power. Zeke remembered the ancient dragon blood he drank long ago, a magical gift that gave him and the other newborns an endless source of power. He recalled that immense power and thought about how the children who ate different amounts of it grew muscles far stronger than normal people. Zeke felt the new divine dragon power from his past life swirling inside him, a force that had changed him so much he was even surprised to see it. He shut his eyes inside his own thoughts. Yet I've only managed to find 1 star. Zeke bent his head to study his hands and whispered in frustration that scoring just 1 star was a disaster, since he should have reached at least 4 stars by now, knowing that stars are the power he gets when he pushes himself to the limit. He felt the energy humming deep inside him, like a tiny universe filled with twinkling stars where more light meant more power, but also made it harder to create new ones. Zeke squeezed his fist hard, thinking back to how Gila's dragon used to be the only one in history to reach 10 stars. He swept his hair back and whispered that time flies so fast, noting it's been 7 years since he was reborn as the illegitimate son of the Dragon Clan leader. While thinking of her and realizing his own mother died and his father never appeared, raising deep doubts about him, not just as a parent, but as a person, he scratched his head and made a confused noise, as if asking, 1,000 years have passed. Zeke remembered the maids feeding ancient dragon blood to the newborns and realized that besides being reborn, waking up 1,000 years later before he could even grasp the flow of time, this world has become a place where only the survival of the fittest is tested to the extreme, and this was the clearest example. He recalled the terrifying clan share that made newborns drink ancient dragon blood in a ritual known as the Dragon's Trial. Zeke thought about the survivors and mused that only those who survive the trial can become true dragon warriors. So he turned his head and saw a maid stepping out to look for him. Zeke stared at the maid he had just shouted at, thinking back to how no instructor had ever visited him in 7 years, and he roared in surprise that while the passing trial usually meant combat training, here they were with only maids. So he insisted that physical training was more important than learning to fight anyway, and demanded to know about the other kids and the main clan. But when she repeatedly refused to answer his questions about such matters, his face darkened until he yelled that treating him this way was too harsh, only for her to bow and say she was just following orders to take care of his daily needs, leaving Zeke to stare thoughtfully at her and realize that this single maid at the 3-star level was more than enough to handle basic combat training. Right after, Zeke turned away under her confused stare, muttered fine, whatever, and headed into the forest, leaving behind 7 years of barely speaking that felt wildly unnatural. He turned to ask suspiciously if he'd been ignored. Then Zeke hurried alone into the empty woods. Next, he quickly pulled a little tree right out of the ground by its roots. Zeke quickly shoves the whole tree and grass into his mouth and chews as fast as he can. Right away, he stuck out his tongue and groaned. This poisonous grass still tastes awful, but I'll count it as training, then glanced around while chewing and muttered, patience, patience. Zeke whispered as he glanced nervously at the bushes, admitting that someone has been watching him lately and wishing he could do something about it, before shouting forward that he wasn't expecting such a big reaction over something so small and demanding that if anyone has something to say, they should just come out and say it. Immediately after, Zeke pursed his lips, darted over to the spot, and shoved aside the bushes to take a look. Deep within the bushes, soft purple lights danced through the air. Hiding behind thick leaves, he whispered that something was there, and as Zeke spotted a wild boar swallowed by black mist, he frowned in shock, wondering what new monster this was before the beast suddenly turned its eyes straight on him. Its entire form poured out dark fog while it stared right at him. Next, it zoomed straight at him, but Zeke just grinned at the forest, thrilled to see it coming. The moment Zeke dodged the blow, his eyes lit up as he punched forward, his fist glowing with golden light. He hit with all his might, knocking the berserk boar flying backward across the field. Zeke looked down at the bright glow on his hand and shouted that even a tiny touch from a one-star creature made so much power. Then he hoisted the boar's dead body onto his shoulder and marched away, wondering if the strength of stars really mattered so much and if he should finally leave this forest to explore the sea. Hiding behind a tree with a staff in his hand, a man whispered in confusion, "What's going on?" as he watched an untrained youth defeat a raging wild boar with just one strange power and somehow sensed that he was watching, proving the boy was truly not normal. He pondered Zeke's fate, realizing that while his mother passed young and his father ignored him, the powerful clan blood within Zeke meant he could never truly escape their watchful eyes. The man sat cross-legged on the ground, muttered that even an illegitimate child carries the clan blood and things would get interesting. Then his figure vanished instantly with no trace left behind. On the other side, where Zeke had grown up, he tightened his backpack strap and asked, "Who are those?" 3 at 4-star and 1 at 5-year, all-season fighters. What do people like that want here? Standing outside the door, he pressed his ear to the wood to listen. The fresh country air suggested a quiet place with no chaos nearby, and since their conversation didn't sound like an assassination attempt, they probably had no bad intentions. He slammed the door open and shouted, "What is everyone doing in a place like this?" Zeke stared at the emblem on their clothes, puzzled, wondering what the little dragon clan was doing there, before the man stepped forward quickly. He took off his hat, placed a hand over his chest, bowed respectfully, and said, "This must be our first meeting. We've come to escort Zeke for an examination," which left Zeke startled and suspicious as he widened his eyes and mouth in shock, letting out a loud that echoed everywhere, while his incredulous voice proclaimed, "Even though I've never been taught anything properly," and he stood there with his arms crossed, looking up in stunned amazement. "I never thought I'd be heading back to the main manor. After messengers from the main house brought me back to the clan, the maid quickly told Zeke that he needed to change clothes because he couldn't enter the manor looking that way, leaving him stunned as he wondered how one could be told not to enter the very place where they live, the dragon's lair. Seems like over the past 1,000 years, the Eldragon clan has built a special school where every child is raised at home until age 7, ready to enter the dragon's lair. And today is the big entrance exam." He gave himself a confident smile, thinking, "I'm just the kid who never got taught a thing." Zeke held his legs straight while he looked around to see what was going on. Right after that, he suddenly crouched down and held his head in frustration, even though taking the exam is mandatory. "So I've been dragged all the way back here from the border." Zeke couldn't stop thinking about how things used to be, and just as I was ready to go, all that hard work I'd done suddenly felt like it had vanished. As he squatted on the ground, a voice suddenly called out from behind, and a boy with soft blue hair bowed to ask if Zeke was okay. But Zeke just looked up confused and asked who he was, leaving the boy awkwardly explaining that he was Ringies from Ortsil village and had just asked because Zeke didn't look well. The boy buzzed with energy, and Zeke thought inwardly that even though the kid looked shy, he was actually quite smart. So Zeke suddenly stood up, offered a friendly apology, introduced himself as Zeke to you, Ringies, and then loudly complained that he had no clue what they planned to make us do. Ranges awkwardly hugged his arm and complained that the exam questions haven't changed in years. But Zeke shrugged and admitted he didn't even know what was on the test because he had never learned anything, leaving Ringi stunned. Ringi worried silently that Ringi was being too reckless with the test, wondered if he was okay, and tried to explain what was on it to Zeke when a distant shout suddenly called out, "Hey, you weakling, Rangies." The Ranges heard it, spun around, and froze in fear. Suddenly, a bully from Ordsol village stepped up and sneered, "You weakling? Why are you even here? Get lost before you get hurt." The Ranges gave a nervous reply about the dragon's entrance exam, which made Red sneer at you. Redden gripped his stomach and laughed right in his face, sneering, "No way you're getting in. Your dad's just a fake dragon, so what could you possibly be able to do?" At that moment, Ringies' hand balled into a trembling fist with rage, and Zeke saw it right away. When it comes to the dragon clan's ranks, the absolute sovereign, the prime dragon, sets the clear order. Next up are the young dragons, then the adult captains, followed by the powerful elders, while at the very bottom are the pseudo-dragons who can't enter the lair or graduate, known as the immature ones. He bowed his head in silent anger, yet he wanted to prove we weren't fakes. Then, a voice suddenly shouted, startling him and demanding how he could be so sure without even trying. Zeke rushed to stand between the three of them. Retin snarled with disgust and demanded, "Who are you? What's your problem?" Zeke calmly replied, "Nothing. I'm just wondering why Ringies can't fight." Pointing directly at Ringies, the man scoffed. "That's obvious because he's weak." Zeke's face twitched slightly at the insult. "Weak," he repeated, staring hard at Ringies and judging him. "He is actually way stronger than you all." Hearing this, the man was stunned, his eyes going wide with shock. Their anger exploded into curses as they snarled. "What did you say? You claim we're weaker than that loser." Just as loud footsteps suddenly echoed closer. Two men shouted for attention, with the dragon instructor sternly announcing that the entrance exam to the dragon's lair was starting, requiring candidates to register in order and move quickly with their number tags. Retin stopped arguing with Zeke and walked past him with a warning, reminding him that he remembered his face, while Zeke sighed helplessly at the instructor's anger before Ringi awkwardly asked if they were the same age. Zeke confirmed this and crossed his arms to point out that since the exam was mandatory, claiming it was impossible was pointless, leading Ringi to question if Zeke could really withdraw or if he truly knew nothing. After Ringi awkwardly suggested that Zeke should also withdraw to avoid getting hurt, Zeke simply smiled and rubbed his chin, secretly knowing that someone of his level couldn't withdraw no matter how hard he tried, which made Ringi admire his confidence even without understanding the test itself. Zeke laughed happily at that, but Ringi scratched his head as he realized they needed to hurry or the test would start. After that, they rushed to the instructor, who explained that the test was simple. Use only the gear you have or your bare hands to scratch a mark on the stone, and you pass. The instructor grinned and raised 3 fingers while saying, "But you only get 3 tries," and Zeke loudly agreed it was so easy, which startled Ranges. "What?" Zeke muttered to himself, thinking that he just needed to scratch a rock after that crazy dragon ritual, which felt totally anticlimactic since he expected something much scarier. As soon as the instructor over there shouted "begin" in a cold voice, one boy rushed forward and hit the rock with all his might. Even the ones in the other line couldn't stop the panic, so they grabbed their heads and cowered in fear. Then came another loud crash, but something burst out and the boys' hands began to bleed. Zeke's group stood on this side, their jaws dropped in pure shock and horror. The kid cried out and collapsed, so the instructor wrote it down and asked if he wanted to try again, but since he stayed still, someone nearby smirked and said, "He's giving up, clean him up." Right in front of everyone, they dragged the boy away, while Ringi stayed beside him, clutching his head in terror, as Zeke felt anger rising and muttered, "So this is the test," staring at the strange rock and asking what it was until Ringi's explained it was the rebirth stone that instantly heals even tiny scratches and reflects physical attacks back at them with hundreds of times more force. After hearing that, Zeke paused to wonder if that demand was truly too much, though he realized that if he could spread his strength evenly and strike correctly, he might just be able to take a hit. Zeke nodded, a bit puzzled as he worked it out, realizing that true power control mattered far more than the martial skills everyone talks about. His eyes scanned the room once more. By now, everyone was holding their breath, eyes glued to the ground, knowing that even the toughest guys from earlier were about to fail this impossible test. Over there, another wail of misery joined the air as the kid sobbed in terror, and poor number 51 failed right after. Then another teen stumbled, and number 202 fell right after. Tags kept slipping away, while the instructor just kept writing on his paper without any feeling. Then he spoke again, and number Zeke glanced at his tag before declaring, "My turn," prompting Ringies to warn him worriedly to quit, only for Zeke to wave it off and step down with a calm, "Don't worry." Ringies stood high above, frozen with tension and unable to speak a word. Over there, the instructor pointed him the right way while clutching his pen, all set to take notes. Just then, the instructor's eyes went wide with total surprise. Watching Zeke step into the arena with bare hands, the dragon instructor looked suspicious, but Zeke just smiled and confirmed that no weapon was needed because his fists were enough. The candidates on the stands were buzzing with excitement because that guy planned to fight with only his bare hands, which wouldn't work since he'd get crushed trying to break the rock without any gloves. Ringies winced as someone warned that losing the arm would be worse than losing a fist, and he immediately wished he had stopped him from fighting harder. The instructor held back, and I nodded to begin. As Zeke felt the rock, he thought, "This is my first time seeing a mineral this old. Probably formed over 1,000 years. There's so much I don't know, but never mind." He checked himself, then immediately swung his fist. Ringies panicked and stood up, thinking, "This is bad, I have to stop him," so he shouted, "Zay!" While Zeke, feeling extremely excited, believed, "With this I can unleash my full power right now." And Ringies watched helplessly as Zeke showed no sign of stopping. Zeke's move right then was the first strike of the Dragon Ruin art, a blast that exploded outward. Before we could blink, the rock blew up and sent pieces flying all over the place. The power was so strong that it made even the Ringies in the back rows tremble with fear. The dragon instructor stood frozen in disbelief, because what just happened blew past everything he ever thought possible. Zeke gave an arrogant smirk, just like we all expected. "This move is still a bit too much for my body right now. I still have a long way to go in my training." The stands went deathly quiet because no one could recover from what just happened. After a pause, Redden roared in anger and smashed the rock right in half. Meanwhile, Laika admired interesting, while Ranges was still dazed and couldn't believe what he had just seen. He shouted in shock, "What?" While the dragon instructor thought to himself, "It's impossible. That kid punched away half a rebirth stone, a feat only a master should do, and yet this boy managed it despite being illegitimate. I wonder if he truly has the main clan's blood, but that move feels strangely familiar." Zeke looked dazed as he asked the examiner about his result, and the dragon instructor quickly declared him passed before the assistant handed him his prize, urging him to hurry up while Zeke annoyed everyone by complaining about their rush, only for Ringies to admire his feat and Zeke to grin smugly at how easy it really was. Remembering the prize, he asked, "Oh, right, Rangies. What is this?" Rangies looked up and said, "It's a recovery potion," which made Zeke even more confused, so she happily explained that it was the regular kind he saw, and though he held it up to check if it looked like poison or some strange spiritual drink, she told the truth that it was actually a rare cloud-piercing clarity potion made from very special ingredients. More specifically, this potion holds secret herbs from hidden lands and cores from powerful divine beasts that are nearly impossible to beat, allowing it to heal fresh wounds and old scars instantly, while massively boosting power. But because the ingredients are so hard to find and the recipe is complex, it rarely appears. Zeke took a sip of the clear liquid to see if it tasted any different. Right then, the cut on his arm vanished. Ringies explained that it was a spiritual elixir, leaving him surprised since he'd always found the recovery potions from the Eldragon clan far superior to the ones sold in the market. Ringies hesitated and asked, "Surprised?" "Huh," to which Zeke answered honestly, "Of course I'm surprised. Wounds this serious shouldn't heal instantly," though he felt a little disappointed since it didn't boost his power like a true spiritual elixir would. Down in the arena, the results kept piling up as number 373 passed, then 395, and then 405. After hearing the results, Zeke sighed with admiration, knowing that passing was expected, and his turn next was number 414. Even though Rungi was scared, he gathered his courage and stepped up, knowing it was now his turn to do it. Zeke shouted encouragement, telling him not to be nervous, to stay calm, and not to worry about his performance. But as he watched Rungi getting ready, Zeke rolled his eyes in annoyance and muttered, "What is that guy doing?" Ringies took a deep breath, the instructor barked begin, and instantly he squeezed his eyes shut and slashed his sword. The instructor spoke in a cold voice, saying the first try had failed, and there were only 2 attempts left, so Ringies gritted his teeth, vowed this time it would surely work, and gripped the sword again to strike hard at the stone. The second try was just as terrible as the first. He shook with fear and shouted, "No way," only to be met with mocking laughter from his friends, proving once again that the pseudo-dragon's son is just a regular pseudo-dragon, so he should give up. Seizing the moment, Redden opened the door to their past and asked, "What did you say earlier?" Rettun shouted mockingly, asking, "Didn't you say the guy lying there was stronger than us?" The insults got worse until the dragon instructor demanded my opinion, leaving me one last chance to try again before we had to start over. Ringi trembled like a leaf before Zeke somehow appeared beside him and asked, "What are you doing?" Zeke asked with a puzzled look, "Why do you choose a sword when a spear would work just as well?" The ranged fighters didn't grasp his point, so Zeke spoke up calmly to clarify that using a weapon like a spear without a plan was simply the wrong choice for them. From the safety of the stands, someone just poured fuel on the fire, leaving you stuck in a state where no matter how hard you swing your sword, you can't scratch that unbreakable stone. The other students joined in laughing, asking if he was stupid, but his dad never used a spear, only teaching him swordsmanship. Another group muttered to themselves, agreeing that swapping out their weapons wouldn't solve anything. Zeke ignored his own polite words to shout that the examiner was breaking the rules by switching weapons, only to hear the instructor dismiss it with a cold, "No issue," which Zeke then used to cheer Ringies up and deliberately taunt him into action by asking if he'd really just let it slide, causing flashbacks to suddenly flood Ringi's mind. Ringi slowly stood up and said, "No, I will," then decided to try using a spear, remembering how his father once failed to enter the dragon's lair. Despite that, he was always kind and caring, gently patting my head whenever I was sad or happy. Even though they called me a fake dragon and laughed at me, my dad never minded and taught me everything from simple life lessons to how to hold and use a sword. Back in the present, Ringi stood in the plaza's center and silently promised himself that the man his father raised is real, and today, right here, he would prove it. Even with a strong will, Ringi's mind was still a messy jumble of thoughts as he stared at his spear, wondering how to use it now that he had to trust Zeke instead of his sword. Right then, Zeke leaned in and shouted, "Ringi's," pointing right at the rebirth stone. He urged Ringi's to charge straight ahead without a second thought. Ringi's gripped his new spear tightly, muttering to himself as he thrust forward, his mind bouncing between Rhett's cruel jokes and Zeke's steady support right beside him. Even though we just met, this feels strange, but he's finally made up his mind, raising his glowing spear toward the rebirth stone and declaring, "I understand. I'll try," while reminding himself that since Zeke believed in him, he now believes in himself too before charging forward. Ringi could feel the spear's power surging through him, leaving him both thrilled and nervous as he realized how much stronger he had become since first holding it. "No more thinking," Ringi shouted, driving his spear with all his might straight into the rebirth stone. Redden and his crew hadn't even seen the results yet, but they were already laughing hard and making fun of him, proving me right when I said Jack couldn't win even with a new weapon. As time seemed to slow down while Ringi's drove the spear into the rebirth stone, he stared in disbelief at how the weapon felt like it had always been part of him. The spear tip shot through the rebirth stone at lightning speed, sending a blast of dust and debris flying everywhere. Retton and his crew stood frozen in shock, shouting in disbelief at what they were seeing. "What?" The assistant instructor beside the dragon instructor shouted in shock, but the dragon instructor kept his face stone cold while muttering an astonished remark because he hadn't just scratched it, he had pierced right through it. After Ringi's finished his turn, Zeke jumped up to clap and cheer, telling him he did great while the still-dazed Ringi's stared blankly, asking what he just did. The dragon instructor marked the result and announced that number 414 had passed, leaving Ringi stunned as he held his spear and whispered in disbelief that he actually passed. Zeke slung an arm around his friend's shoulders and grinned, confirming that it was exactly as he expected, while Ringi's studied himself, tears welling up in his eyes as he murmured that he passed before hugging Zeke tightly and shouting that he really did it. Zeke laughed and said, "I told you so," while two guys in the stands beside Rhett clamored that it must have been a fluke, insisting it had to be true. Just then, the dragon instructor loudly announced that the entrance exam was over and that the ceremony would begin right away, prompting Zeke to ask Ringi. Zeke curiously asked Ringi's, "Who's that gloomy guy?" And after Ringi's trembled in fear and admitted he was the clan head, Zeke bluntly joked, "The clan head with that face? Can't he lighten up?" Even ice feels warmer than him, which made Ringi's panic so much that he quickly covered Zeke's mouth and begged him to stay quiet before slowly removing his hand and sweating bullets while whispering, "Please be quiet. Okay, okay," to which Zeke just nodded and said nothing more. His eyes met the Eldragon clan leaders as he thought to himself that their strength was truly formidable, with many at 7-star and quite a few at 6, a realization that made him sigh in admiration. Zeke stared at the clan leader and thought carefully about what he had heard. Zeke felt a strange energy coming from Baltzul Dragon, the current head of the Dragon clan, and realized he must be a powerful 8-star expert. Knowing how incredibly rare an 8-star was, with fewer than 12 people in the whole world having reached that level even 1,000 years ago, he couldn't help but speak his mind aloud, which made Ringi's turn to stare at him with disapproval as Zeke muttered thoughts about it being his father. The other Dragon clan leaders stepped aside to clear a path for Baltza to the center, where the dragon instructor shouted loudly to get everyone's attention. Baltza marched straight to the very middle. Baltza spoke in a cold, sharp voice, telling Strive to become flesh and blood like Eldragon. His words unleashed a weird single-sound wave that blasted right at Zeke. Everyone in the stands couldn't escape the roar that seemed to lift them off their feet. As the air filled with panicked whispers, Zeke stood calm while watching Ringi's turn purple from the struggle, realizing with a frown that the others were being crushed by this man's terrifying pressure, which he secretly disliked even as the plaza slowly returned to normal once Baltza turned away. Suddenly, the crowd cheered as another man from the Eldragon clan laughed out loud and added to Baltza's speech, showing that his words were truly encouraging. Lord Baltza expects a lot from all of you, so Zeke stared at him with curiosity, wondering who this imposing man was, while his booming voice echoed through the room, declaring that he wouldn't waste time on too many greetings. "Give it your all, young ones," he said with a hearty laugh. But Zeke still wondered who this man was as he stepped back to chat casually with the dragon instructor, who teased him about treating his joke like the truth while the man joked right back, letting Zeke sigh in relief that the heavy pressure was finally gone and the crowd had fallen deadly silent, too scared to speak a word. No one breathed a sound, but Zeke didn't care about the quiet nonsense and just sat there, staring down at the plaza below. The dragon instructor clutched a list and boomed out that dorm assignments were being called, so anyone whose name was shouted had to go right away. Hearing that, Zeke looked at Rungi's with a puzzled frown and asked, "Aren't we all heading to the same place?" But Rungi's shook his head and explained that there are actually 4 distinct dragon layers. New students were sorted into dorms named after the 4 directions, and Zeke nodded, finally understanding. At that moment, the dragon instructor called out number 315, and Zeke stood up with a smile to say goodbye to Rungi's, wishing him well before it was his turn to go. At the Eastern Dragon's lair, there are rows of grand old buildings surrounded by wide, shady gardens. Right now, Zeke held a note in his hand, scratching his head in frustration as he realized that after 1,000 years, so much had changed, and he wasn't sure which way to turn. After fighting through the confusing paths to find his dorm, Zeke finally pushed the door open and sighed with relief. "I made it. He must have gotten lost and is running late, so my roommate is probably already inside." He swung the door open with a bright smile and a wave, saying, "Sorry I kept you. Today we're roommates." But then he paused, staring at the person with a doubtful look and asking, "You're who?" Zeke grinned broadly. "Looks like we're pretty lucky to meet, Haringis." The blue-haired boy smiled back. "Yeah, I was worried I'd end up alone. This is great." After that, Zeke flopped down onto the bed. "Nothing else to do today, right?" Ringy stepped over beside him and answered, "That's right. The training sessions start tomorrow." Zeke immediately pouted and muttered, "Oh yeah." Seeing his reaction, Ringy's couldn't help asking, "Were you even listening?" The instructor made it clear. Zeke beamed with a bright grin and flashed a thumbs up, admitting he hadn't heard a single word, only for Ringy's to snap back that bragging about silence was pointless before sternly reminding them to sleep early since training starts tomorrow, leaving Zeke to sit quietly under the soft sunset light with nothing else to say. Suddenly remembering everything he'd been through, he thought that while he'd planned to leave this dull place and go adventuring, the rebirth stone and potion meant the entrance exam had turned into too many wild surprises. Zeke glanced at the window and thought that sticking around the Eldragon clan for a bit was a good idea to see how things had changed over 1,000 years, and before he knew it, a whole month had passed at their stronghold. On the training ground, a group of trembling kids lifted weights with both hands while the dragon instructor shouted loudly, "Listen up! The dragon breath I taught you is an excellent breathing technique created by the 15 clan head of the old dragon family, and you must master this ultimate technique in every situation." The moment he was done, he turned his head and gazed thoughtfully in one specific direction. Leah closed her eyes and used the technique flawlessly, making him wonder since many have already mastered dragon breath, especially now that her overwhelming power shows she is nearing the 2-star level. The dragon instructor looked away with a doubtful frown, only to see Zeke casually hoisting weights while balancing 3 heavy boulders on his back, proving he's got the clan head spirit, but absolutely no training. The dragon instructor stood behind him, watching in silence, but unable to hide his shock at the amazing scene before him. Meanwhile, Zeke took a calm breath and thought to himself that he never expected his own dragon breathing trick to get better and become famous under the name Dragon Breath. He sat cross-legged with a bored look, wrapped in a faint golden glow, as he used a breathing trick to pull air energy into his body, upgrade his power, and rely on his own skill to make it work. That's why noble families guard their most powerful methods as sacred secrets. And while Zeke closed his eyes to think, he realized that though dragon breath is safe and simple, he doesn't need it if he only wants to calm his mind. Suddenly, the ghost of his past self filled his mind, revealing the Dragon King's secret breathing technique passed down by Gila's dragon, the only art that lets you control energy without stopping your breath, even while moving, a power so mighty that almost no one can master it. Zeke's transmission of this breathing technique suddenly appeared, and he immediately guessed they deliberately simplified it so anyone could use it, thereby raising the overall strength of the entire clan, leaving me surprised that my technique would be passed down in such an altered form. I wonder if other martial arts after 1,000 years have been changed like this too, really looking forward to it. While Zeke stayed hidden in the corner, Leo watched him from the shadows without him knowing. Not long after, the kids who had just finished training started eating their meal in the dining hall. In the middle of all the noise, 2 kids froze with scared faces, staring hard at the arm that was reaching for a food plate. Zeke grinned and took a big bite of the food he'd snatched, leaving crumbs stuck to his cheeks. While Zeke chewed his food and asked Ringies if something was wrong since she looked so lost in thought, she helplessly noted his strange strength and stamina, only for Zeke to casually mock her weakness. Zeke grinned at Riley and shoved a plate of buns toward him, insisting he eat more and train harder with no other choice, until the blue-haired boy groaned in misery and protested that he already had his own portion. Right after that, Zeke suddenly glanced behind him, realizing that some of them were incredibly trained. Just as Zeke was lost in thought, Leica suddenly stepped up and asked, "Hey, you're pretty good, right? Who are you?" Thinking to himself, Zeke still answered instinctively, "Who are you?" while the guy next to him spat out the water he had just drunk. "Huh?" He grabbed Zeke and whispered urgently, "Zeke, you don't know who this is. She's Lady Leica, the clan head's daughter." Zeke just shrugged and said, "I don't know." Ringi screamed in panic, "That's impossible. She's a candidate to lead us, and we're not even allowed to talk to her." "Press close," Zeke blurted. "Then I guess I'm the clan head's illegitimate son." Ringi froze in shock while Leica calmly asked, "Really?" Zeke held up his hand and said, "Why would I lie?" Leica slammed her fist on the table and asked, "So how could you crush that rebirth stone with your bare hands if you're just an unwanted child with no support?" Zeke turned back to his meat and replied slowly, "It's because it's me," then told Ringi, "Stop staring and eat." Zeke's reply left Leah stunned for a second before she burst into a grin and asked him to join her team, but he just stared at her with a blank look like she'd asked him to do something impossible. Leica kept pushing the offer, showing how she would stand by you as your ally, and asking if you were ready to have her as your own. In her mind, a vision flashed by the two of them standing together side by side in the future. Leica rested a hand on the table, smiling as she painted out a future where you use your strength to help her become clan head, promising to treat you well in return, but Zeke simply closed his eyes and said no thanks. Leah suddenly hushed her words, forcing him to peek over to see why she wouldn't say what she thought. She let out a freezing blast of rage, telling you that you also want to fight for the clan leader spot. Zeke felt a strange energy around her and realized that, even at her young age, she had reached the next level and could now push raw power out of her body. But he replied with no care, saying he didn't care about being clan leader or any of their business, which shocked Leah so much she jumped up and slammed the table, then saw a blur flash past her face as Zeke's face darkened and he drove his knife hard into the wood. The knife was just a few centimeters away from Leica's fingers. Zeke's eyes glowed golden as he declared, "I answer to no one because I am the strongest," leaving Leica frozen in shock beneath his gaze. She paid, then thought to herself that she was in a tough spot. Right then, Ringies began to shake as he stood up to calm things down, shouting, "Calm down," only for Leica to suddenly roar, "Then I'll make you submit. Fight me," while Zeke just stared blankly with his mouth open, and Ringies beside him froze in sheer terror. Soon, a kid walking by stopped to ask where everyone was going, only to be shocked upon learning that Lady Leah from the Typhona branch was about to spar, while other students watched from behind walls, whispering in disbelief about who could possibly be her opponent. Zeke rubbed his head and muttered that things were getting tense, while Ringies worriedly asked if he was okay against Lady Leah, to which Zeke nonchalantly replied that he still didn't know who she was and questioned why she suddenly switched to formal speech, causing the blue-haired boy to widen his eyes and shout that Zeke was the clan head's son, only for Zeke to smile lightly and say he could do whatever he wanted. Most importantly, Ringies held tight to his arm and poured out everything in a rush. Leah is the daughter of the current clan head Baltza. She carries the blood of the Typhona family, one of the Eldragon clan's 4 pillars, and like the other gifted children of Lord Za, she became a genius who mastered every form of the legendary Typhona Thunder Sword by the age of 7. The moment he stopped talking, Zeke held up his hand in an empty gesture, admitting he only knew she was the clan leader's daughter, which made Ranges scream in panic and ask why, before Zeke explained that everything was brand new to him. The blue-haired boy grabbed his head in misery, wondering how this could happen before deciding not to ask. But Zeke suddenly spoke with comfort, and since he doesn't know it, it only makes the moment even more thrilling. Even though Zeke seemed okay, Ringies was still worried that facing Lady Leah was too dangerous and wondered why Zeke accepted the challenge, to which Zeke replied that he never backs down when someone dares him. Immediately after speaking, Zeke turned his head toward the other side, just as she appeared to have arrived. Leah jammed her sword into the earth, her face burning with rage as she declared that the talk was over, but as she rested on her weapon and shouted, "Done talking," Ringies shook in fear while Zeke grinned beside him, prompting a panicked Ringies to beg for caution, which Zeke calmly dismissed by asking why Leica was so determined to challenge him, leading her to confidently reveal that she wants to become clan head by making him submit. causing Zeke to wonder why this matters to him before. Laika's mood darkens as she realizes he knows nothing about the clan's crisis and accuses him of being illegitimate, only for Zeke to offer to answer if asked, while Leah urgently explains that there are 5 candidates for the next leader, with everyone but Zeke already aligned to one of the 4 dragon branches. She considered everyone's strength and history, then spoke about how vital it is to find the next clan leader, which is why they all gathered at the dragon's lair to fight for their branches, and she admitted she needed more power to stand against her siblings. Zeke frowned, wondering if the 4 branches were truly at war, and thinking the situation was complicated, but he nodded and said he understood. Laika then drew her sword, declaring that as a candidate, she must gather even more resources, and with that, she leaped into action while Zeke looked up, feeling tired. Leah lunged forward with her sword raised, screaming that she would win right there, only for Zeke to twist away just as she brought it down. He ducked his head once more to slip out of Laika's sharp slash. She screamed in rage, "I won't let you get away with this," and one stunned trainee shouted how fast she was, while the guy beside him noted she wielded the huge sword with such ease. Leah kept charging straight at Zeke, who chased her without stopping. The trainees around the training grounds buzzed with excitement as they cheered for her growing power and speed, realizing that inheriting the family's legacy made her a force to be reckoned with as the big fight finally approached. Leah gritted her teeth and swung her sword again, but Zeke dodged, popped up behind her with a teasing grin, and told her he couldn't even land a hit, leaving Rengi's wide-eyed in awe, and Zeke himself impressed by her strange, super-fast moves that a 1-star fighter shouldn't be able to pull off, which only made Leah yell at him to shut up and focus while he calmly insisted he was already locked in. Zeke had already punched straight into her stomach and said coldly, "I can hit back just like this," while Leah coughed in pain, clutching her gut. She drove her sword into the earth and hunched over, clutching her stomach. The trainee outside gasped in shock. No way, because every single attack from Miss Laika missed, leaving her furious and asking who that guy was while Zeke calmly replied that she is fast, but she is still just a 1-star like him. He looked closely at her body, noting her breath, the way her eyes moved, and how her muscles tightened. Zeke said that watching her tells you most of what she'll do, while experience fills in the rest, and right then Laika forced herself to stand up. She swung her sword and shouted that it was ridiculous, but he leaned back to dodge and retorted that he told her so before springing up to kick at Laika. She ground her teeth in anger as Zeke tightened his fist and aimed another punch at her, declaring he could read everything, only to blast her backward into the wall while he stood there frowning in silence. As one trainee screamed, "Miss Laika!" and the crowd gasped in disbelief that she had lost, the ranges rushed forward to cheer Lord Zeke's victory, only for Zeke to coolly deny their praise while Laika stomped her foot as the dust settled. Zeke grinned and spoke up as Leah pumped every ounce of her energy into her core to stop my blow, then winced in pain while clutching her stomach and breathing hard. Rengi panicked and shouted at Miss Laika to stop, but Zeke stepped in to pull Rengi back, warning that he couldn't be held responsible if they got caught in the crossfire. A faint glow started to pulse around Leah, and Zeke noted she'd been showing these signs before, but he wasn't sure if she had truly hit 2-star power yet. Leah brushed the blood from her face with her hand, and then slowly stepped back onto the arena floor. "Look at that mark," the trainees shouted in shock. "It's a white halo, the sign of a 2-star who can unleash power from outside their body." Zeke thought, 2-star, where you can project your energy to use martial arts. Laika smoothed her hair and grinned. "Thanks to you, I finally broke through." But then she glared at him and swung her blade, yelling, "Game over, you can't win." Zeke dodged her fast attack and laughed. "Whoa, you're quicker than I thought," while pretending to be amazed as she struck again. Suddenly, a small cut appeared on Zeke's cheek, and he touched it in shock, wondering what had happened, only for Laika to step forward and explain that a pale white energy flowed from her as she revealed her new 2-star aura, crackling with golden lightning, which made Zeke laugh with excitement at the chance to finally see a rare technique in action. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light exploded outward, followed by the roar of thunder as the greatsword technique, known as Thunder Radiance, unleashed its power. Electricity kept shocking Zeke from head to toe, and he couldn't stop himself from wondering, what is going on? He grinned and asked, "So you're controlling lightning, huh? That's way too overpowered," which made Leah raise her sword high and shout at the guy for daring to say such a thing. She drove the blade straight into the earth just as lightning surged up, sending Zeke leaping high while you seemed to be having a blast in this thundernet. He smiled at Laika, noting how the lightning bolts had changed and how tough they suddenly felt. High above, the crowd shouted, "What a fight! Just one level up, and everything changes," while Rengies looked down at Lord Zeke with a face full of fear and worry. Zeke quickly figured out his opponent's weapon was still easy to read, with no sudden changes in how she moved. He locked eyes with her piercing gaze just as the lightning aura ignited her thunder greatsword, shattering the air and proving she had become far faster and more unpredictable than he could have guessed. Zeke grinned and surged forward, wrapping someone in thunder. Yeah, I could have fought back if he hadn't paused to watch Laika's sword moves, leaving me wondering just what kind of power he truly holds. On her side, Laika smirked in victory, proving you can still smile even when things are tough, though you look far too relaxed for this moment. Leah quickly slashed at him, promising to wipe that smile right off his face. Then her foot flew forward without a moment's delay. Leah fired her Thunder Radiant ship. He ducked aside, studying the move before realizing it was like a pillar of lightning. Far off, a boom tore through the silence, hurling dirt and rocks skyward. When Rengi spotted it, she instantly leaped down the wall to panic Lord Zeke, even as the crowd behind shouted, "Hey, wait," but Zeke stood tall with that same smile on his face. To Laika, that felt like a dare, so she instantly answered with a burst of blazing light. Zeke caught the blow and sank to one knee to steady himself. On the other side, Ranges rushed over, shouting, "Miss Laika, please stop if you keep going," his voice turning mocking with a question. "Isn't he still holding up just fine?" Lightning crackled over Laika's body as she pleaded with a worried Zeke to surrender to the enemy, admitting he was in bad shape and promising to stop if he just submitted right now. Zeke bowed his head and smiled quietly, staying silent without saying a word. Laika grinned and said, "Even as an illegitimate child, you're still a proud dragon." "Huh? I get it now." "Fine, then I'll finish you off with everything I've got." She held her sword high as powerful lightning rushed toward it, showing off her amazing sword skills. The first secret art is called Heavenly Thunder. The lightning hit Zeke and turned him into a pillar of blinding light. He was struck by lightning so fast that everything turned white around him, and the air crackled with thunder. Rengi screamed, "Lord Zeke," and sprinted forward in terror just as Zeke hit the ground and stopped moving completely. Laika drove her sword deep into the ground with a fierce, brutal motion. She turned her back on the fight, accepting that this is where the story ends. Just then, a voice shouted, "I got it!" and a huge beam of light burst up from behind Laika. She spun around in shock, asking how someone could have a lightning aura. Then Zeke stood up smiling and let out an "oh" as he realized what this power was called. He beamed with happiness and told you exactly how it happened. Zeke stood there with his arms crossed and a very serious look, while I had no clue what was going on either. Leek stood there, stunned and speechless. He kept smiling as I purposely took every attack you threw at me to study this power. And then, in disbelief, you said I could use it too, while Zeke thought joyfully about enduring those strange lightning strikes while I kept using my breathing technique, the Dragon King's breath. He remembered how Laika's entire body crackled with lightning, and then Dragon King's fiery breath collided with her electric aura. Lightning sparked on Zeke's hands while electricity built up inside him. He wiped the grime from his face with a smile before I even noticed, and I suddenly knew I could twist lightning, though I had no clue how my body made it possible. Wait, not so fast. Zeke stared right at Laika, and asked if her family's special sword style meant the whole clan had unique bodies. Then he rushed toward her while sparking with lightning, muttering that after such an intense training session, he was ready for even more. He grinned, his fist tightening as electro power surged through him. Well, he had climbed to 2-star levels too, but Zeke's gaze darted sharply in one direction. Suddenly, Laika swung her sword right at him. Zeke grinned and tilted his head up as he shouted, "Over yet," but then lightning flashed, and he suddenly burst forward at incredible speed. After Zeke used his new power, he couldn't stop shouting that this was it. He quietly studied the surge of power coursing through him, feeling how it strengthened every nerve to create an amazing body that sharpened all his senses. Zeke whispered to himself that he needed to adjust, while Rengi remained dazed, leaving the watching clan trainees confused and unsure if they were just imagining the chaos. By now, Zeke and his opponent were clashing, but Zeke dodged her lightning-fast slashes so easily that he was shocked to realize she could no longer land a hit on him. Laika lost her cool and shouted, "Are you mocking me?" while Zeke rushed in to strike her sword, telling her, "No, I see you as a formidable opponent." Laika felt a huge force coming and instantly grabbed her sword, taking a step back. Zeke rolled his wrists with a grin, saying the fight was finally over and he was about to reveal his secret art, which left Laika in a panic as she realized he must have been trained in some hidden family skill that he could pull off so easily. Suddenly, he popped up right in front of her with a distracted grin and a sharp huff of breath. Laika shouted, "Oh no," and tried to dodge, but Zeke's palm slammed straight in her chest, unleashing a secret dragon remnant destruction art. He poured every ounce of his strength into the massive thunderclaw, unleashing a devastating attack. She took a harder hit that made her knees buckle and crash to the floor. A voice boomed in front of the stunned Ringis, declaring the match finished. Zeke grinned down at Leah, declaring that the fight had been seriously one hell of a blast. She fought hard to stay still, staring in shock at the impossible truth that she had lost. Leah ground her teeth together, frustrated that she must become the clan leader. She looked up at the sky, her face full of sadness, knowing she had to beat her brothers. Leica saw her older brothers looking down on her, so she knew she had to become the clan head at all costs and could not lose. Right then, Zeke spoke up, saying how amazing she was and how strong she truly was. And then he bent down to tell her he'd learned so many cool new things during this meaningful time, while holding out his hand with a big smile to invite her to keep training together since he didn't want their sparring sessions to end. Zeke grinned as he reached for Leica's hand, excitedly saying he couldn't wait for the next round. And when she took it and admitted she had lost, a swarm of monsters suddenly appeared inside the rift a few hours later. A man stood trapped in the middle of a crowd of monsters. Belta just watched them march straight at him without a second thought. He furrowed his brows, and Belt's eyes flashed right away. As a terrifying roar filled the air and a shadowy dragon emerged from behind him, Baltza whispered dragon might before drawing his blade and sprinting straight at the monsters. Baltza swung his blade in a wide arc, whispering the name of his first dragon aura move as the sword's energy swept away the monsters before he calmly sheathed his weapon. As the rift gate slowly creaked open, Baltza strolled forward with a calm step while his soldiers surged in to finish the job. A soldier bowed to Lord Baltza and said, "I have news. Miss Leica has reached 2 stars." Sir Baltza came to a sudden halt, right in his tracks. He glanced at the soldier gruffly as the soldier nervously added that reaching 2 stars at her age was already a huge achievement for Miss Leica, and by the time she finished training, she might even have 4, or perhaps even 5 stars. Baltza spoke in a cold voice, saying that talent meant nothing and ordering the messenger to disappear if he only had trivial news, while demanding to be told the moment the girl became useful. The soldier stopped for a heartbeat, but Miss Leica had already lost. Belza asked in surprise as the girl challenged one of the elders. The soldier shook his head and said, "No, sir. The kid who beat Miss Leica is the same age as Zeke," while Belza murmured, "That woman as a child, Zeke," before pausing to think, "Yes, she does have a strange gift for fighting." Baltza stared at the soldier, who remembered that Zeke had defeated Miss Leica and reached 2-star level all by himself, even though Baltza had died, giving birth to the boy who taught him how to fight. Baltza gave the order to begin the first phase of training. The soldier looked at Baltza with shock, asking if it was too soon for the kids who had only had a month of training and hadn't even earned 1 star yet. But Baltza answered coldly that death doesn't care about training or rank. Only the strong survive, and those who fail the first trial don't deserve to be Eldragons. So the soldier bowed to agree. And then Baltza suddenly ordered him to tell Freya about the boy beating Leah on his own, because it was interesting, adding that Freya would now watch the whole challenge closely, which the soldier quickly understood. Baltza smirked and muttered, "Injik ha." Interesting indeed. And the next day at the training grounds, the trainees pushed themselves to the limit, practicing with wild intensity. Ringis was pushing himself hard to get better. Over at Zeke, he was loading boulders on his back while practicing the dragon seal, planning to double the weight today with 1 huge rock, 2 medium ones, and a solid horse stance. Zeke remembered that this method, created by the 15 clan head and nicknamed Dragon Breath, was just a simple body-boosting trick anyone could learn, even a kid, but Ringis walked up confused, asking if Zeke wasn't going to train, to which Zeke quickly clarified that he was indeed training, but not with his muscles. Instead, he was practicing the dragon seal fighting style. Zeke calmly replied that he'd already learned it, leaving the shouting guy in shocked disbelief, while Zeke closed his eyes to correct Ringis, pointing out that his power flow was heading the wrong way. Ringis stopped in his tracks, but Zeke just dropped the rock and said, "Wait right here." He raised his hand to point at the guy's body as it spun around, leaving Ringi dazed and whispering, "Did I just float?" Once finished, he nodded, "That's the right way," and Ringi stood there in awe, whispering, "Thank you so much, sir." Ringi stared at him with serious eyes, admitting that he had truly mastered the art as expected from Lord Zeke, but Zeke instantly yelled, "You're doubting me. What kind of person are you?" Flustered, Ringi apologized and explained that since this was the first time anyone had taught him besides his father, he felt desperate. He then recalled Zeke's victory over Leah and suggested that the dragon seal method might seem simple to Zeke, only for Zeke to cross his arms and declare that he was actually impressed by the technique's stability, secretly thinking that his own powerful but complex style of the Dragon Rim of Destruction wouldn't suit his son, yet finding the idea of learning other ancient dragon techniques, exciting and smiling as he realized he was now free to focus on regular body training while Ringi eagerly begged him to guide him like he had just done. Zeke's eyes went wide as Ringi's yelled, "I want to get stronger, even just a little." And after Zeke laughed and said he didn't mind, the Days guy asked if it was really okay, only for Zeke to reply with a smile that he wasn't lying and that the guy definitely deserved it. Right then, Leah shuffled over nervously and asked, "In that case, I want you to train me too," causing Ringi's to mutter in shock, while Miss Leah Ringi's questioned if there was actually a problem, only for Leah to admit that her pride was shattered after being overwhelmed by Yuzek's lightning aura in their last fight, leaving Haran just beside him to give an awkward laugh. Leah stared at him with fierce determination, thinking how much stronger she needed to become to defeat her brothers and even him, so she begged him to train her. She asked if it was okay, but Zeke stayed quiet while he thought about it. Leica looked disappointed and shook his head, realizing that training with a rival wasn't the right move for someone like me who might one day inherit our legacy. Zeke stood quiet and thought to himself that even though the man wasn't born to the main line as the clan's official head, he was still a strong contender to take over the family. After a long pause, he finally asked if you were truly all right, since that injury should have kept you immobile for a month. Leah nodded as she explained that her recovery medicine solved everything, making Zeke whisper to her that it felt like a miracle, only for her to correct him that it wasn't the same potion from the entrance exam, causing him to cheer for the amazing time they were living in while she blushed and worried about her immobility, leading Zeke to shrug and promise to train her anyway, since he could never refuse an ambitious young person, which made her stare at him in confusion until he reminded her. They were the same age, prompting her to clench her fists with a fierce determination that she would do whatever it took to get stronger and become the clan head since he had beaten her before. Zeke couldn't help but wonder why you're so obsessed with becoming the clan head, especially since you just mentioned that role right after challenging me. Leah spoke softly, saying that if she didn't become clan head, her only future was a political marriage to an annoying cousin or being forced into servitude, and seeing his face darken at this news, what happened next? She shrugged as if it were common sense, saying that keeping the dragon bloodline strong was vital for the 4 great clans since their special essence energy could be used in so many ways. Zeke suddenly exploded with rage, shouting that they had to run because those guys made him sick, and just hearing him makes ranges beside him shiver. He gritted his teeth and shouted about hating those old-fashioned summer traditions, promising to tear them all down, but the instructor cut him off with a sharp, demanding command to pay attention. Leica froze, confused, while Zeke grumbled about perfect timing ruining the moment, leaving Ranges looking like he was about to cry and terrifying me with his sadness. The 3 of them spun around to face the spot where the instructor had just shouted for everyone to gather. He shouted out the news that, even with a packed schedule, a new instructor had arrived personally to guide you all, so be thankful it's her. As everyone leaned in to listen, a girl with fiery red hair stepped up beside Leah, gently touched her hair, and asked if she was Miss Leah, causing Leah to turn around in surprise. The moment their eyes locked, she instinctively stepped back, causing her dog to leap up and hug Zeke tightly, while the red-haired girl pretended to be surprised and said, "Oh my." She winked, complimenting your amazing reflexes and noting that your spiritual energy wasn't half bad. Zeke was so tightly hugged by Ringi that he couldn't even sense her presence, and trembled while wondering who this person could be. Just as the dragon instructor tried to introduce himself, the person next to him cut in with the same lively energy before he could even finish. Miss Fra waved cheerfully, saying hi and telling everyone she was nice to meet all of them. Fra gave Zeke a searching look, confirming his name with a confident nod. She was surprised, but he replied calmly that there was nothing surprising, even as Fra's brows furrowed and Zeke smirked with gleaming eyes, noticing that this mysterious miss had an interesting martial artist skill that intrigued the clan, impressing Zeke with her silent stealth and unique energy flow that made her steps make no sound despite her shoes. Frag spun around on her heel to walk back to the instructors, her voice shifting back to a serious tone. Still smiling after hearing you'll be my guide, I cheer that everyone else is excited and gasp when I realize it's the legendary wind goddess Freya herself standing right there. The dragon instructor sternly told Miss Fra that she's now a 6-star member of the Black Dragon Guard and that everyone should learn everything they can from her. When the trainees huddled whispering about the elite Black Dragon Guard, a bold kid raised his hand and asked if Miss Fra would really train them. She beamed happily, but just as the kids started to cheer, she warned that she had one test they had to pass first. Fra handed over a spirit crystal, saying, "Don't worry, it's easy. Just keep this crystal safe and survive the deadly poison dragon mountain for a month." Zeke recognized the name and recalled that this land is filled with deadly creatures so poisonous that even a simple blade of grass could kill you. He remembered how Zeke once nervously tasted strange fruits that left him shivering, wondering if it was too soon for the kids, while forewarned that breaking or losing your crystal during the trial meant instant elimination. A trembling kid raised his hand to ask what would happen if we failed, and she smiled naturally as she said, "You'll be expelled if you survive," but Frager explained that getting poisoned is easily fixed by using the dragon breath technique precisely, and as long as you keep your crystal intact, everything will be fine. Leica spoke up, but the instructor reminded her that monsters are also there. Feigning surprise, the instructor said, "Oh dear, just defeat them," while tapping her cheek as if it were obvious that without victory, they'd starve and die before the test ends, causing the young trainee to panic over whether any Dragon Slayer technique could truly handle such creatures. Frag grinned and held up 5 fingers to show you that you have 5 days left before the real challenge begins. Time enough for each of you to pick a weapon from the Eldragon family's foundational martial arts and start your training. She leaned forward, pointing to the table behind her, and said, "Dealing with the monster gets easier if you can master the technique in 5 days. But if you don't," Fred dropped her voice to warn, "I won't be responsible for anything that happens after the exam." Another kid then asked, "If things go wrong, will you help us write it up?" She just waved her hand dismissively, as if to say, "Oh, come on." Fra spoke with the icy calm of a teacher, warning that in this place known as Lragan, the weak get left behind, and only the strong make it through. If you can't fight the monsters, that's just your fate. So if you can't even pass this simple test, you might as well lie down and let the poison and monsters take you. Hearing that the kids broke out in cold sweat while Zeke, Leah, and Ringies each wore a different expression. He was baffled by how different this place was from the dragon, and as he stood there puzzled, an image from the past flashed in his mind of Zeke holding his tiny son proudly with a smile, saying, "Look, Dad, this is your grandson. So cute," which made him wonder, "I don't get it. But why is that?" Fra clapped once to end the chatter, then shouted that he'd hand out the martial manuals for every weapon, so everyone should come grab the one they need. One by one, they moved up to pick something, leaving everyone confused and wondering what to choose since no one knew which one was right. Ringiza's finger trembled from fear, but Zeke walked over to remind him to pick up the spear he used in the entrance exam, and when Ringiz sighed in relief and thanked him, the moment felt like a turning point in their adventure. Leica hesitated on the side, stopping her despite the thunderous spirit great's sword technique she had just seen in its basic form, until she suddenly realized it was her own Leica. "Zeke told you to pick the sword skill." She was surprised when he turned to walk away with a light wave, a gesture that made up for his absence. Leica was still puzzled, but she nodded and agreed to take the one you chose. Once everyone had picked their choice, the group gathered back together. "Had you all received yours for the next 5 days until the challenge began?" Frager warned that if you want to survive, you must train with all the passion of someone whose life depends on it, because otherwise, you're just going to die. Everyone froze in terror, except Zeke, who suddenly remembered that the seniors from last year's ceremony would also try to steal your crystals. Ringi stood shocked yet delighted, thinking, "That's more like it. Fra told us that seniors from 10 years ago are joining the challenge to steal your crystals. But with so many of you and such a huge mountain, you probably won't run into them. She warned that they will hunt you. So do your best," as she waved her handkerchief and left. Ringi clutched his head in pale shock, realizing that not only monsters, but even the seniors themselves were coming to attack us. Leah frowned, realizing that the 2-star seniors from 10 years ago were far stronger than she could handle against an ambush, and most others would likely not survive. Zeke calmly stretched as Yui suggested forming a small hunting group, but Zeke smiled with excitement and declared he'd enjoy the challenge alone before cheerfully walking off to grab food, leaving everyone a whisper that he was really strange. 5 days later, as the sun climbed over the mountains, its first golden rays slipped through the leaves to wake up the quiet forest. All the trainees were gathered together, nerves tight as they waited for the test to begin. Fra called out that the day was perfect for the test and told everyone to gather as they got ready. While at the campsite, Ringiz held his spear tight and told Leica he was finally scared of the test, and Leah felt so anxious she could only make a quiet sound. Watching my classmates busily set up tents and carry supplies, I kept following ranges even though Lord Zeke warned that going with Miss Leica might be wrong, especially since many nobles in our class come from far more respected families than I do. I'm just a regular guy with no star level, and even after pouring out my worries to Leah, thinking about it always makes me shake with fear. Right then, a blonde boy and a green-haired girl approached from behind. Ranges, who had been listening to his anxious thoughts, turned around to see them, and with tearful eyes happily called out, "Selene Raymond." While the green-haired girl Selene felt excited and shy to team up with a noble like Miss Leica, Leah nodded in agreement, encouraging them that it didn't matter if they were born noble or common. And as Ranges tightened his grip on his spear and promised he would never be a burden, his burning determination spread to Raymond, who also vowed to work hard to avoid disappointing them, leaving Miss Leica smiling proudly and counting on all three of them. She turned back to ask Zeke again if he was really going alone, and he answered with a confident smile that he couldn't wait any longer. Selene and Raymond knew about Zeke's past, and while Selene sighed in relief and admired him, Raymond proudly declared how special it felt to share royal blood, only for Raymond Leah to shout that he was shaking just as much, leaving Zeke stunned as he innocently asked Leica why she was scared when they were all gathered here together. When Zeke casually shrugged as if nothing mattered, Selene, Raymond, and Ringiz fell silent in helpless agreement that there were plenty of reasons to worry, but Leica teased him by asking if they really had potential, to which Zeke smiled seriously and admitted that her judgment was spot on since she had gathered the most promising students. Thinking he spoke with firm confidence, they boast incredible defensive and offensive skills, making your test a breeze, though Fra can't help muttering dryly that Zeke always acts this sure of himself before the instructors arrive to find everyone gathered and praise the smart choice of forming a team since some students still need to sharpen their weapon skills, which immediately draws the attention of all the students turning to listen to her. After saying hello, she raised her spirit crystal and asked if everyone was ready, then explained that to pass the test, you must survive a full month in the Poison Dragon Mountain while keeping your crystal whole, since all the crystals are exactly the same. When they heard it, the students got nervous and started whispering, but Zeke just stood quiet in the crowd, thinking deeply while everyone else was scared. He had already found a clever trick to break the rules. If you lost your crystal, just steal one from someone else. Fra kept talking about the rules, saying that once you climb the mountain and find a place to hide, the older kids will start snatching crystals right out your hands. As she talked, two boys boasted loudly, with one asking if most hadn't even earned 1 star, while the other claimed it would be as easy as candy, which only made the other students feel a fresh wave of dizzying fear. Frager wrapped up her speech, shouting, "Now the rules explanation is complete.